Hi guys, welcome to this morning's early show with Pastor Gina, which is not actually a video this week, as I had told you guys last week. Today is a live stream. So, for those of you who don't know who I am Pastor Gina. I am a pastor based here in Kechara in Malaysia. But I guess if you're watching this, you probably already know that, given that you are watching this on the Kechara Facebook fan page. But let's wait a couple of minutes for more people to join us before we get started. I just want to preface this live stream by telling you guys that it's not going to be like the previous ones where like they were like an hour long. It's going to be slightly shorter, all right? So good morning, Esther. Hi, nice to see you. Thank you for joining us this morning. Yeah, so while we're waiting for a few more people to join us, why don't you guys tell me how your week has been going? And also if there are any technical issues. I am filming this in a new location, so the internet connection might be slightly spotty. And I mean, there's always things with technology, right? So if you can't hear me clearly, please let me know and I'll try and get it sorted, all right? But yeah, let me know how your week has gone. Let me know where you're tuning in from. I know that we always have a lot of silent watchers, silent watchers. So morning, Lisa. Hi, Li Fong. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what you guys have been up to and how your week has gone and whether you've gotten the vaccine or not. Man, I really want the vaccine, but yeah, not probably till the end of the year, given my age and no comorbidities. Yeah, okay, let's see. It's the first time I'm using this platform as well, so I'm not exactly entirely familiar with it. So if I keep looking off screen, it's because I'm trying to figure something out. All right. Oh, did not want to do that. Okay. So let's get started. I thought that since Qingming is coming up soon, and on April the 4th, which is next Sunday, there are going to be a lot of activities held, live streamed. So virtually, there'll be a lot of activities held on that day in conjunction with that. So I thought that what we could talk about today is the very light-hearted topic of death. All right. I figured it would probably be helpful to come up with a topic to share and give you guys some food for thought in case you've had a very busy week and you haven't been able to come up with questions for me. So let's start with a short sharing and then we can go from there. All right, but yeah, fair warning, I will be answering questions later towards the end of the broadcast, towards the end of the live stream. So get your thinking hats on and get your questions ready and then I'll answer them then. Morning, Vivek, Nathan, nice to see you here. Thank you for joining us. Before we continue, I do want to thank our sponsor for today's video, who is Didi, who dedicates her contribution to all strays. May they gain some benefit from this sharing, and may humans develop more compassion for animals. So thank you very much, Didi, for your sponsorship and your support of the programs. Morning, Jen Hao. I hope that you got rest after yesterday's Kechara Soup Kitchen distribution. Yeah. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about death. And when we talk about death in Buddhism, it's not spoken about with a sense of morbidity. I know that some of us can be quite superstitious, or in Malaysia, as we say, can be quite pantang about it, thinking that if we talk about death, we are somehow inviting it. And to a certain extent, that is true, that can be the case. But in Buddhism, generally, overall speaking, when we speak about death, when we talk about death, or when we meditate on it, or when we contemplate on it, it's a very powerful practice, death meditation. We talk about death, we meditate on it from the approach with the attitude of practicality, with the attitude of reality. So practically speaking, because no one can escape death, reality being that everyone's going to pass at some point. So with a practical approach, when we meditate on death, we are thinking about what we can do in order to prepare ourselves for it. And when we talk and meditate on death as well, it may surprise some of you to know that such a practice, such a meditation can be actually very liberating. And I will explain later why death meditation is liberating. All right, so for most of us, we normally experience death at quite a young age. Usually it's when our grandparents pass away, or when our parents take us to like a memorial service or something for someone that they know, or when a pet passes away. Hi, Jason. Thank you for joining us. So yeah, normally our first experience of death comes when we're quite young, whether it's a grandparent passing away, or if it's a pet passing away, or if one of our parents, one of a friend of our parents passes away, so we go to a memorial or something like that. All right, it's death meditation is a very powerful practice. It is death is one of the foresights that Buddha Shakyamuni saw, which prompted him to leave the palace to pursue spiritual practice. It was actually the third of the foresights that Buddha Shakyamuni saw. So the first sight that Buddha Shakyamuni saw was someone who was very old. The second one was someone who's very sick. And then the third one was someone who has passed away. The fourth one, in case you guys want to know, is a mendicant or an ascetic. So after seeing the third of the four sights, which was a funeral, which was a corpse, Buddha Shakyamuni returned to the palace, and the sight triggered him to engage in death meditation. So Buddha Shakyamuni meditated and thought, is everyone I know going to pass away? Is anyone free from death? Will my beautiful wife die one day? Will my beautiful son, my beloved son, die one day? Can anyone escape death? Can anyone cheat death? And Shakyamuni came to the realization, or Prince Siddhartha at that time, came to the realization that it's not possible for anyone to escape death, and that if we're unable to do anything about this situation, about that fact, if we have no control over it, it's a form of suffering. So that unease at that realization led Shakyamuni to leave the palace, and eventually led Shakyamuni to leave the palace for good and to pursue spiritual practice. Why is that such a powerful meditation? Because if Prince Siddhartha hadn't left the palace at that time, hadn't gone to meditate, hasn't gone to pursue his spiritual practice, pursue a spiritual path, none of us would be here today. The entire corpus of Buddhist teachings, of Buddha's teachings, would not exist today to provide us with a method, or provide us with a path to leave samsara, to leave suffering behind, to alleviate other people's suffering. So death meditation is one of the triggers that led Shakyamuni to leave the palace, which then led to him becoming enlightened, which then led to a set of teachings which all of us are able to benefit from today. All right, so an extremely powerful meditation. Now, when we talk about death, or when we consider the benefits of death meditation, what we also need to look into are the characteristics of death itself. So the characteristics of death are that it is inevitable, that it's going to happen. It can come at any time, so it's not predictable. We don't know when it's going to happen. It can come at any moment. So a characteristic being that it is unpredictable. It's not related to our age, and it's not related to how old we are. So it doesn't matter if we are 5 years old, 5 days old, 5 years old, 5 months old, 25 years old, 95 years old, 105 years old. It can come at any moment. When I was in university, I want to say I was 18, 19. Someone in our university halls passed away. He went to sleep one night and his heart just stopped. And his heart just stopped when he was asleep. And he never woke up again. So it can happen at any moment, right? And we never know when. And it's not related to our age. You get some people who are in their 90s, in their 100s, who are extremely healthy. And then you get some people who seemingly succumb to illness when they're very, very young. Another characteristic of death is that it can be fast, or it can be slow. So it can be fast as in perhaps we meet with an accident and then the death is instant, or it can be slow in that we experience terminal illness for a long period of time. Another characteristic of death is that we can't cheat it and we can't escape it, and it's universal. And there is a very famous story from the Buddha's time, which some of you may be familiar with, which explains the universality of death. It's the story of Kisa Gotami. So Kisa Gotami was a lady who lived during Buddha's time. She was, let me show you guys what she looks like. And let's see. No, not wanting to work. Okay, so yeah, Kisa Gotami was a lady who lived during Buddha's time, and she had a son. She had a young son, and this young son, her only son, passed away. And of course, she was extremely distraught by this turn of events. So Kisa Gotami carried her son in her arms, and she went from house to house, and she asked all of her neighbors, begging them, please help me revive my son, please help me to cure my son, bring him back. And every single household that she went to, everyone wasn't able to help her. They said, we can't help you. So finally, someone who was very kind told her, go and see the Buddha. Buddha Shakyamuni will be able to help you, to provide you with a cure for your son, to bring him back to life. And so with her son, she ran to see Buddha Shakyamuni, and then she prostrated in front of Shakyamuni and she begged Shakyamuni, please help me bring back my son. And Shakyamuni said, very kindly told her, okay, I will help you to bring your son back, but what I need is a mustard seed or mustard seeds from the house where, which has not been touched by death. So Buddha Shakyamuni promised her, if you can bring me a mustard seed from a house which has not been touched by death, I can make a medicine for you to bring your son back. So she was completely overjoyed because finally it felt like she had found a solution to, her problem. So she ran around the whole place looking for this mustard seed. But every single household that she went to, she would ask them, do you have a mustard seed? And they were like, well, yes, we have mustard seeds. Have you ever been touched by death? Has your household been touched by death? And every single household she went to, they would always answer, yeah, my parent died. My child passed away, my auntie passed away, my uncle passed away, my grandfather passed away, my grandmother passed away. Every single house she went to, somebody had passed away. So, Kisa Gotami, she kept searching because she really, she loves her son, so she really wanted to bring him back. And by the time the sun had set, she realized that death is universal, that there's no way that we can cheat or escape death, and that there's nothing that can be done to bring her son back. So she buried her son in the forest and then went back to Buddha Shakyamuni, where she received her first Dhamma teaching. So this story about Kisa Gotami is very, very famous in Buddhism for showing us how universal death is. All right. So those are the characteristics of death, that death is universal, that it's inevitable, that it can come at any time, that it's uncertain, that it's not related to how old we are and not related to our age, that it can be fast, it can be slow, that we can't cheat it and we can't escape it. All right, just give me a second because I'm having technical difficulties here. All right, and you guys can see the story of Kisa Gotami. You can search for it online. That's how you spell her name down there. That's how you spell her name. So you can search for it online and read it, and also read how Shakyamuni was so kind to her, not to tell her straight out that I'll never be able to bring your son back, but allowed her to come to that realization on her own. And also the Dharma teaching that Shakyamuni gave to her after she came back to him with the realization that death is universal. All right, so when does death actually come? Death comes when our karma to sustain this life, to sustain this set of circumstances that we're experiencing ends. All right, so when our karma to be in this life ends, that is when death will come. Now, death meditation, as I mentioned before, can be a very powerful practice. Why it can be a very powerful practice? Let me see who else has joined us before I continue. Hi Sharon, hi JW, hi King Hoi, hi Wei Ting, hi Yiling. I'm guessing that you are tuning in from the States, and Yiling, I did reply your question. I don't know if you saw it. I replied to your question about gravel bike setup. It is on my Instagram, so you can go and have a look at it over there. All right. But yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, death meditation can be a very powerful practice. And meditating on death can prompt urgency in us to practice because we don't know when we'll die. So as Rinpoche always says, if not now, when? And if we meditate on death, we realize that if we don't know when death will come and we cannot predict the moment of our death, it behooves us to practice immediately now. Meditating on death will also prompt the realization that the truth of our existence is impermanence, that no matter how good things may seem at the moment, or indeed, no matter how bad things can seem at the moment, eventually the set of circumstances for this bad or good situation will pass, will end. Death meditation can also make us more kind. It can make us more forgiving, and it can help us to let go of things more easily. Because if you don't know when you're going to pass, do you really want to spend the rest of your time, however long or however short it may be, holding on to, for example, like holding on to a grudge or showing anger to somebody? All right. Death meditation, another benefit is also making us less attached. Because when we meditate on death every single day, we live with the realization that at some point we will have to let go of everything, that we will not be able to bring everything with us. And so our attachment to material objects, our attachment to gain, or as Rinpoche described it to me, was our practice, or the strength of our practice of the 8 worldly dharmas will lessen if we meditate on death every single day. Another benefit of death meditation is that it makes us less afraid of failure. And that's the part about liberating that I mentioned earlier. Why does death meditation make us less afraid of failure? Because if you mess up, what do you have to lose? With death meditation, you develop the understanding that everything's impermanent. So if you fail, the failure is only temporary. If you know that you have nothing left to lose because you have to give it up anyway at the moment of death, why not just try? Why not just go for it? Why not go for the things that you are afraid of? So in that way, it's very liberating, because fear is something that stops us from trying new things. Fear is something that stops us from committing all the way to something. For example, fear or doubt is something that stops us from committing all the way to our spiritual practice, from committing all the way to our guru. So when we meditate on death regularly, consistently, it can become a very liberating exercise for us. In all of these ways, if we were to meditate on death consistently, the ultimate benefit is that we will see very, very swift progress in our spiritual development. What Rinpoche explained to us before was that the real benefit of tantric practices, such as Vajrayogini, is the ability to control our deaths and the ability to control our rebirth. That is actually the real benefit. Why is that the real benefit? Because if you gain some kind of accomplishments through your tantric practice and you're able to control your death and your rebirth, you are able to guarantee that you will consistently and continuously take rebirth in a place where you can continue your practice of Dharma, and therefore take the next step in your spiritual practice and progress in your spiritual practice. If we were to meditate on death consistently, we would develop this sense of urgency to practice. When you develop this sense of urgency to practice, you will see swift results in your spiritual development. For example, if you haven't received Tantra yet, you will quickly find yourself in a position where you are ready to receive Tantra. If you have received Tantra, you will quickly find yourself in a position where you can develop attainments from your practice. What Rinpoche explained was that the real attainments of tantric practice is not being able to fly in the sky. It's not being able to see into the future or have clairvoyance. It's not, the ability to generate inner heat or to be able to take sustenance from the sun and so on. All of those are tools for us to. All of those are tools for our spiritual practice. For example, the ability to generate inner heat means that you can be in a very, very cold place and continue your practice. without being distracted by the fact that you're too cold or too hot. Being able to take sustenance from the sun means that you are able to practice in a very remote and isolated place, so you don't have to worry about food or water. Being able to fly in the sky means that you can travel great distances to receive Dharma teachings. So all of those abilities are not the end result that we're aiming for. But what Rinpoche explained was the end result that we aim for is the ability to control our deaths and our rebirths in order to guarantee that we can progress in our spiritual practice in our next life. And that is one of the benefits of consistent death meditation, is prompting this sense of urgency in us to practice and to gain results. Then therefore resulting in spiritual progress. All right. So when we meditate on death and we understand death, it removes the biggest fears that we have about death. The biggest fears being what happens after we die. The fear being that it's going to be painful. The fear that we don't know when it's going to come, and the fear that, and this one I think a lot of people will be familiar with, but the fear that we will die with regrets because we haven't done everything that we wanted to do, or that we will pass away with this so-called unfinished business. So when you meditate consistently on death, it will prompt urgency to practice, make us less attached, make us less afraid of failure, prompt the realization that our existence, the truth of our existence, is impermanent, make us kinder, make us more forgiving. And all of these will lead to us being less fearful of death. Why is it important for us to become less fearful of death? And I'm talking about the unconstructive kind of fear. I'm not talking about the fear that leads us to feel that sense of urgency to actually practice. I'm talking about the fear that's paralyzing. That is why fear is not constructive to our practice if it manifests in the paralytic, the paralyzing kind of way. So meditating on death, confronting death, seeing death is the first step for us to turn that fear energy, or the sense of fear that we have about the topic of death, into something that's productive. Now, we're talking about, death meditation and all that, but on a very mundane, not say mundane, in a very straightforward way, in a very prosaic way, how can we deal with death? Since all of us have to experience death at some point, how can we deal with death? So we can deal with death from two approaches. So from the approach of the death of others, and from the approach of our own passing. Now, the approach, when we talk about the death of someone else and how we deal with the death of other people, the advice that I'm going to share with you guys comes from when our grandmother, when my grandmother died, and it was advice that was given to me by Rinpoche, and I've put a thingy down here for you guys. Google samrinpoche.com advice at a funeral, and you can read the full blog post, as well as the handwritten notes for the talk, for the advice that was given to us when my grandmother passed away. So yes, it was specific to our family, specific to that instance of my grandmother passing, but it's advice that can also be applied and practiced by other people as well. And the core message that Rinpoche gave us when our grandmother passed away and how to deal with her death was to focus on those who are left behind, focus on the people who are left behind. So Rinpoche taught us that the way to deal with my grandmother's passing was to focus on our grandfather. And Rinpoche said that we should take care of him and make sure that he's never alone. And that, my grandmother and grandfather had been married for decades, and they had been together for decades, and they had done everything together for decades. And so now my grandfather has lost his life partner. For us to deal with our grief, we should focus on the people, on the person who has been left behind, which is our grandfather, my grandfather. Rinpoche said that he has been very strong for all of us to put on a very brave face and not cry during her funeral. And so now it's time for the family to be strong for him. So how we can deal with other people dying is to focus on taking care of those who are left behind. And Rinpoche told us to focus out and to focus on what it is that we can do for them. Focus on what it is that we can do for the people who have left behind or the people who have passed. And this is a very powerful practice. Why? Because when we dwell on something, or when we ruminate on something, so we think about it over and over again, we play it back in our heads over and over again. So we keep hitting rewind, play, rewind, play, rewind, play. All right. So when we keep doing that, what we're doing is we're directing energy to something, to a feeling, to a thought, so that it grows. So what is it that, JP is always teaching in his meditation classes? If you see a thought come, let it go. You see a thought come, let it go. Refocus your attention on your breath. Refocus your attention on your breath. And it's the same thing with this. This is another method or another manifestation of that practice of observing something and then letting it go, not feeding it with too much energy. So when we dwell or when we ruminate on something, we are directing energy towards a thought or towards a feeling for it to grow. And we're feeding that sense of anger, or we're feeding that sense of abandonment, we're feeding that grief, that depression, and so on. When we remove that source of energy, that feeling, that emotion, that thought starts to reduce, starts to become smaller, starts to decrease, starts to die down. How Rinpoche explained it to us, the analogy that Rinpoche used to explain to us is that of an engine. So Rinpoche talked about there being an engine with, for example, 6 inlets for gasoline, and that engine powers a light bulb. And what Rinpoche said is that gasoline is when we focus on ourselves, and when we think about ourselves and basically our selfishness. And the gasoline constantly feeds the engine. Our selfishness, our thoughts about ourselves, our self-cherishing, self-grasping goes into the engine. And that light bulb that the engine is powering is our afflictive emotions, and it's our suffering. So what Rinpoche said is, as we cut off the inlets one by one, if there's, let's say 5, since it's easier, we cut off, there's engine, light bulb, okay? If we cut off this inlet, the light bulb here grows dimmer. If we cut off this inlet, the light bulb here grows dimmer. You cut off this inlet, dimmer, dimmer, and then finally, it's gone, it's out, the light bulb's out. So what Rinpoche explained was that each time we cut off an inlet, that is us making a decision in that moment not to focus on ourselves. That is us making a decision in that moment not to be selfish, or not to act out of selfishness, to focus on other people. So when we focus out on helping others, when we focus on helping the people who are left behind, or when we focus on the person who has passed and helping them, we are creating space for ourselves to heal. We are creating space for ourselves to heal from the grief, to recover, because we are not feeding it. Because we are, how are we not feeding it? We are not feeding it because we are focused on helping someone else to heal. All right, so how we can deal with the passing or the death of somebody else is by focusing on the people who are left behind, or focusing on the person who has passed. And not just that, but also using our connection with them to benefit them somehow. How can we do that? We can do that by making offerings for them. We can do that by doing practices for them and dedicating the merits to them for their future lives. So earlier, I talked about how we can approach death in 2 ways. One being the death of others, the other being the death of ourselves. Now, why should our attitude towards our own death be any different to the attitude, be any different to our attitude towards the death of people whom we love, towards the passing of people whom we love? If we go to such great lengths to help people whom we love, then isn't it logical that we should prepare for our own deaths with the same kind of effort? Because we know that it's going to come. And we also know that we don't know when it's going to come. If we have that understanding and we have that realization, isn't it logical for us to put in the same amount of effort to preparing for our own passing, as much preparation as we do for when other people pass? If we are constantly, sponsoring pujas, constantly making offerings for people who have passed, how come we don't put in the same level of effort and preparation to our own passing, knowing that it's going to come, but not knowing when it's going to come. All right, so what can we do to prepare for our own passing? With the understanding that for most of us who are watching this, we have not yet developed the ability to control our death and our rebirth. What we can do is make merit. We need tons of merit. Why do we need tons of merit? Why do we need to focus on merit-making activities? We need to do that because we don't know how much merit we have. Simple as that. Okay. There is no bank statement that you can pull out at the end of every month to check your merit balance. There is no bank clerk that you can go to consult. You can't, like, hey Buddha, can you please send me a sign of how much merit I have left? All right. We just don't know how much merit we have left. So it behooves us to engage and create as much merit as possible. How can we do that? We can do that, for example, by making offerings to the Sangha, making offerings to our Guru, making offerings to the temple. We can do that by volunteering, by getting involved in our center's activities. We can do that by doing retreats, for example, prostration retreats, for example, water offering retreats, for example, mandala retreats, and using all the time that we have, all of our spare time, to do practices. Our general habit for most of us is to put things off. So we think like, when my kids are grown up, I will do retreats. Or when things settle down at work, then I will do retreats. Or in this case, when the borders reopen and there's interstate travel again, then I'll come and do offerings in KFR. The thing is, what if things never settle down at work? What if, touch wood, you don't make it to see your kids grow up? What if all the preconditions that we have set in order to do more practice never manifest in the way that we expect? Why is it that we are hinging our making of offerings on whether the borders will open up or not? Why is it that we are hinging our retreats or engaging in retreats on whether we can come to KF or not? We can start with our practice right here, right now, from wherever we are. Remember that one characteristic of death is that the timing is uncertain. And so if we're always setting conditions for our practice, I will do it when this happens. I will get involved when this happens. I will do retreats when things settle down at work or when my children grow up and so on. We are setting conditions thinking that our situation is predictable and thinking that our current situation is permanent and that we can project into the future in a linear fashion. But the reality is, the fact is that we can't. So what we can do to prepare for our own deaths is to do as much practice as possible in our spare time and to not give in to our natural habit to put things off, to procrastinate. Knowing that our deaths will come one day. As a spiritual practitioner, we should think, I have all of these responsibilities in my life, and I'm working on fulfilling these responsibilities in my life. I have all of these responsibilities of this life, and I'm working on them. I should also make the time to take care of the responsibilities that I have towards my future life. Or we should also think, I love my family, I love my friends, I love my Dharma brothers and sisters. As a spiritual practitioner, I want to do all I can to make sure that they don't worry about me when I die. For people who are, when we see, people who are extremely practiced, who pass away, do we worry about where it is that they are going to go, or where it is that they're going to take rebirth? For example, Geshe Thupten or Sha Ganden just passed away, a couple of days ago, a few days ago, passed away peacefully, without any pain, without any illness, passed away because he's old. But when you hear of somebody like that, do you wonder where they're going to take rebirth? Or do you think, no, they have been practicing all of their lives, I have absolutely no worries about where they'll take rebirth, I would only like to make offerings to generate merit? There's absolutely no worry for when someone who's practiced passes away. So if we are spiritual practitioners and we love our family, we love our friends, we love our Dharma brothers and sisters, it makes sense, that we should think, I want to do all I can to make sure that they don't worry about me when I pass. All right, so we can prepare, we can approach death and how to deal with death from two perspectives: the passing of someone else, the passing of other people, and the passing of ourselves. How we can prepare for the passing of other people is by focusing out on others and focusing on those who have been left behind and focus on taking care of them. How we can prepare for our own passing is by doing as many activities as possible to create as much merit as possible so that we create the causes to have a good future rebirth. If we have a sense of responsibility towards how our present life, how it goes, whether it goes well or not, we should also have the same sense of responsibility towards our future life and what happens to us after we die. So what I want to do this week is I want to keep things nice and short this week, just like all the other videos in this early show series, so that it's not so overwhelming. I wanted to give you guys a little bit to chew on and to think about, and hopefully add to or change your perspective of death, because I know that some people don't really like to talk about death, but the thing is, when we deny the truth, when we deny reality, it's only wasting our time. And it's wasting time that we could have spent preparing ourselves and preparing other people for our passing. All right, so I try to keep it as lighthearted as possible when talking about something as serious as death. There are articles on Rinpoche's blog which talk about the process of dying. I believe it's called the dying process. And there are articles on Rinpoche's blog which talk about death meditation as well, and also guide us on some light meditations on death. So I do highly, excuse me, encourage everyone to go read up on those, because it's going to come. Death is going to come. When it's going to come, we don't know. How it's going to come, we also don't know. Whether it's going to be fast or slow, whether it's going to be painful or not painful, whether it's going to be natural or unnatural. And what is worse out of all of that is we don't know where we're going to go after we pass. So being aware of all of these things and understanding all of these things, it should behoove us to develop a sense of urgency towards our practice, develop a sense of urgency towards our efforts to make merit. And that is why we should meditate on death, because it's the practical thing to do. It's us reminding ourselves about the reality of our current existence, and it's liberating because it removes the paralyzing fear of death and replaces it with a sense of urgency, with a sense of, I need to do something about this, I got to do something about this, so let's start doing something about this now, as opposed to waiting until later. All right, so that's it from me in terms of formal sharing this week. Do you guys have any questions, or do you guys have any comments? Let's see who has signed on. Hi, Jean. Thank you for joining us this morning. Hi, Sonam Tashidele. Hi, Sharon Tashidele. All right. So, yeah. Whilst we wait for people to type up their questions or copy and paste the questions, just to let you guys know as well, next month I am going to be answering questions that you guys have sent in to me. This includes questions about stray dogs, how Buddhists view or deal with stray dogs. Going to be answering questions on whether it's compulsory for Buddhists to be vegetarian. That's a very frequently asked question. And I'm going to be answering questions also on donating to a charity versus donating to a temple. All right. So that's what is coming up for April losing track of time. That's what's coming up for April in terms of the early show program topics. And yeah, so yeah, stay tuned for that. And if you guys have any specific questions, you can ask me. If you want to remain anonymous, that's fine as well. I won't read out your name. Just let me know that you want to stay anonymous, but you would like your questions answered, and that's totally fine. Jen Hao asks, what prayer text to recite during the time of passing for an immediate family? So, Jen Hao, there are a few mantras that Rinpoche has taught us to recite during someone's passing. In fact, there are practices that Rinpoche has taught us on what to do upon the moment of someone's passing. The very first thing that we do is we should not touch the deceased person's body. Don't touch them anywhere and, like, oh, please come back, please come back, please come back. Okay, don't touch them anywhere except for the crown of their head. So at the crown of their head, immediately upon their passing, tug the hair. Tug the hair at the crown of their head. Why? It's to draw the deceased person's consciousness, draw their attention to there, so that it increases the chances of their consciousness leaving from the crown of their head, so that they can take a higher rebirth, a better rebirth. If you touch here or you touch anywhere down, we're drawing the consciousness's attention. Gosh, that is a mouthful, consciousnesses. But we're drawing the consciousness's attention to another part of the body. If the consciousness leaves from that point of the body, chances are that they're going to take a lower rebirth. So as soon as someone passes, tug the top of their head. And then what Rinpoche taught us to do is to put a lamrim, or put a holy image, but recommended lamrim, on the crown of their head, all right, to bless them here, and also to encourage the consciousness to leave from the crown. Keep the lamrim text there. Rinpoche also encouraged us to recite the following mantras. So, Medicine Buddha, you don't have to shout it. Recite it out loud, but not yelling, all right? So, Medicine Buddha, you can recite Doji Shukden's mantra. So Medicine Buddha's mantra, Teata Om Bekanse Bekanse Maha Bekanse Bekanse Rangsa Samugati Soha, or Doji Shukden's mantra, Om Benza Wiki Bitana Soha. If you have deep, deep faith in your guru, you can also recite your guru's mantra. All right. So whoever your guru is, you can recite their name mantra. And as you're reciting this, request the three jewels, request Doji Shukden to assist the deceased person to take a good rebirth. So, Om Bensam Gitan, Om Bensam Gitan, Om Bensam Gitan, and think to yourself, Doji Shukden, I request you to please help this person to take a good rebirth. And you can also think to the person, please follow the monk, please follow Doji Shukden, please follow the monk to a good rebirth. All right. When someone passes, try not to cry. Don't wail, don't howl, don't be expressive. When people pass, sometimes when people pass, the consciousness does not know that they're dead. So when you cry, or when you are very expressive in your grief, or when you're howling and all that, it can cause confusion in them. It can cause the consciousness to stay around and not take rebirth immediately. Or it can cause the person to worry about you and want to stay around and hang around to make sure that you're okay. If we love the person who has passed away, we love the deceased person, our love should be the reason why we want them to take a swift rebirth and not hang around. But we want them to take a swift rebirth in a place where they can practice Dharma. So what Rinpoche taught us at our grandmother's passing was, do your best not to cry, do your best not even All right, guys. So Like I said, there was going to be internet issues, right? Even though it's going to be the natural reaction for people to, ooh, let me see. All right. All right. Knew there was going to be internet connectivity issues. If you guys know anyone who oh, can you guys hear me? If you guys know anyone who can help us with our internet connectivity issues here, please feel free to let me know. All right. So oh geez. Yeah. To answer Jane Hao's question. To answer Jane Hao's question, what we can do is recite Medicine Buddha's mantra, and to recite Dorji Shukden's mantra, and to recite our Guru's mantra. Ooh, to recite Medicine Buddha's mantra, to recite Dorji Shukden's mantra, and to recite our Guru's mantra. If we have very strong faith in our teacher, then that is the mantra that we should recite. Now it works. Okay, yeah. So don't cry. Try your best not to cry, because it can cause confusion to the consciousness that has remained behind, and cause them to stay and not take a swift rebirth. And if we really love the person who has passed away, our love should be the reason why we want to have them to take a swift rebirth in a place where they can continue their Dharma practice. So recite the mantra loud enough for them to hear, but you don't have to yell it. You don't have to go, Om Bensa Wiki Bitana Soha. You don't need to do that. You just recite it in their ear, and don't forget to tug their hair. All right. And then the first thing that you should do is to call Pastor Yei, call the puja house, and arrange for a puja to be done by the puja house team. They will do a set of rituals, or they will do prayers that have been prescribed by Rinpoche. All right. Comment here from Yiling. It's a great reminder to meditate on death. I wonder about being fearless in taking risks versus failure. Sorry, Yiling, would you mind, what would you mean by the second part of your comment? Okay, Yiling has a question. If we still have control of our minds, can we also recite mantras at the time of our death? You mean for ourselves? If you have control of your minds, can we recite mantras at the time of death? If you have, okay, the dying process is very step by step. The winds and the different senses, if you want to put it that way, they dissolve in a very step-by-step way that has been described by Buddha Shakyamuni, and it is in a blog post called The Dying Process, which is on Rinpoche's blog. So you can go and read it there. Now, what Rinpoche explained before is that when our passing is very fast, like a car accident, the dying process of everything dissolving still happens, but it just happens very, very quickly. It happens in an instant. Let me see if I'm able to. Oh, there we go. Looks normal now. Okay. Right, when we pass away in a car accident, the dying process happens very fast, just as if we were to pass away very, very slowly. If you still have control of your mind as the dying process is happening, the fastest thing you can do is to think of your lama, or think of DS on the crown of your head. All right, immediately think that way. That is why it is so important for us to practice as much as possible. That is why it's so important for us to practice as much as possible. Having and visualizing our guru or protector at the crown of our heads. If we are constantly practicing that visualization, if our death were to happen at any time, automatically already your consciousness is drawn to the top, because you're constantly visualizing your lama, constantly visualizing your protector on the crown of your head. That is why Rinpoche always encourages us to be consistent in our sadhana, be consistent in our practice, and to practice our visualizations. For example, Ganin Hagema. I'll tell you guys a story actually, which will go some way towards answering Yiling's question. There was one time we were driving in the US. I wasn't the one in behind the wheel, all right? So we were driving in the US. I just want to point out I wasn't the one behind the wheel. And as we were driving, there was it wasn't a collision. The driver hit a curb, and the car went up the curb, so it kind of like went like that. And it was on the freeway, so we were like, the people in the car obviously reacted because it was very sudden. And everyone in the car, I remember, had a completely different reaction. Some people yelled, "Ah!" Okay. Some people yelled expletives, like they yelled the F word, like, okay. As I said, everyone in the car had a different reaction. What was interesting was our guru's reaction. Rinpoche's reaction immediately was to yell out, "Oh mani padme hum." As soon as we hit the curb, Rinpoche just went, "Oh mani padme hum," because everyone in the car genuinely thought that that was it, like that was our last moment on earth. And well, rather, that was our last moment in this existence. So, some people were yelling, some people were shouting expletives. But our guru, the only thing he shouted was, "Oh mani padme hum." When our car finally righted itself, and the adrenaline had died down, the shock had worn off, and whatever, Rinpoche said that he had genuinely thought that we were not going to make it. But what Rinpoche thought of, that he was very proud of himself for, was that at the moment of thinking we were all going to die, Rinpoche's reaction was to shout, "Om Mani Padme Hum." That was the last thing that Rinpoche was ever going to say in this existence. All right? How do we come to that kind of moment, to that kind of state? Practice. The rest of us in the car, our practice is when bad things happen, our first reaction is to yell or to react in some other way. Rinpoche's reaction, because Rinpoche's practiced in it for 25 lifetimes, is to react in a completely dharmic manner, which was to yell, "Om Mani Padme Hum." So, Yiling's question, if we still have control of our minds, can we also recite mantras at our time of death? Yes, you can. Yes, it's possible. It is possible if we practice doing so. We can practice reciting mantras all the time. We can practice by making sure that when we need to call on our visualizations, our daily visualizations during our sadhana, we're able to do it like that. We don't need to sit down and think, okay, I'm sitting here, in front of me is this, there is a cloud, there's a stick. No, you don't need to think like that. But you're able to recall the visualization immediately. So if you have control of your minds, yes, you can also recite mantras at our time of death. If your death is if your passing is very prolonged, let's say it's terminal illness, you can recite mantras the entire time, up until the moment that you're unable to. If you're not able to verbally speak it, you can also do mind recitation, thinking it in your mind. All right. Okay, so next question. Esther asks, after how many hours of passing only can we move the body? There is no specific time. As soon as a person has passed, you touch like this, you put the lamrim on their head, and then you put protector rice in their mouth, put blessed water in their mouth. If you need to move the body thereafter, try to do it in a peaceful way, because the person's consciousness could still be hanging around. Try to do it in a peaceful way. Try not to jostle the body so much. And then as soon as they are in a place, like for example, they're in the coffin or they're in the place where the wake is going to be held and so on, keep the lamrim there. All right. You can move it 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, after the person has passed. But immediately after they pass, tuck the hair on the crown of their head and put the lamrim text on their head. There's obviously a lot more to this, which I'm not able to explain at the moment. If you guys want, I can do an entire video about that. Or I can request Pastor Nero to do a how-to video about that so that you guys can refer to it over and over again in the future. All right. Next comment from Yiling. Meditation on death is liberating as it frees us to take risks, but the consequences of failure can be worse than taking that risk. Yiling, I understand your question better now. Thank you for rephrasing it. Can be worse than taking it. Could you please provide an example to demonstrate how consequences of failure can be worse than taking a risk? All right. Jen Hao asks, in Taoism, the family should be vegetarian for a month or so. What about Tibetan Buddhism? Well, Jen Hao, let me explain this to you, Jen Hao. You should be vegetarian anyway, not just for a month after somebody's passing. In Tibetan Buddhism, if you can, try and be vegetarian for 49 days after a person's passing. In some cases, some people do 100 days. The reason why I say 49 days is because the consciousness has to take rebirth. The consciousness has to take rebirth within 49 days, maximum 49 days. All right. So while the consciousness is still around, you can take vegetarian vows and be vegetarian and dedicate the merit to the deceased person. All right. But of course, if you want to maximize how much benefit that you can create, how much merit you can create for anyone who passes away, take a vegetarian vow for life. Be vegetarian for life. But if you're talking about specific practice, 49 days or 100 days. Okay? Oh, come on. I mean, seriously, if I have a segment in my weekly show, which is called, it's a plant-based life, what do you think I was going to answer? All right. But yeah, 49 days or 100 days. Important is you take it as a practice and you take vows associated with it. You can receive the vows from one of the pastors. For example, Pastor Gimli very frequently conducts vegetarian vow ceremonies, but it's more powerful if you take a vow in relation to the 3 jewels, because you're holding a vow in relations to an enlightened being, in relations to enlightened speech, all right, in relations to enlightened mind. So it's more powerful if you do it that way than just saying, I'm going to be vegetarian for 49 days. So take the vow and hold the vow. And then after you've held the vow, at the end of the 49 days, you can dedicate it to the person who has passed. All right. Okay, so let's go back to Yiling's question. Yiling asked earlier, meditating on death is liberating as it frees us to take risks, but the consequences of failure can be worse than taking that risk. As an example of the consequences of failure, Yiling provides leaving a job for another, thinking life is short. You know what? Very daft. I should have done this instead. There we go. All right. So yeah, leaving a job for another, thinking life is short. I don't understand why leaving a job could lead to consequences of failure that are worse I don't see why that would be worse. Because if we're meditating on death and we're understanding that things are impermanent, if making or leaving a job was the wrong decision, what are the parameters or what are the variables that are preventing us from leaving that job and then seeking something else? Why is that job permanent? Well, why is that decision permanent? If you're meditating on death, the feeling of failure lessens because we understand that having made the wrong decision, the consequences of the wrong decision are temporary anyway, and we can make another decision to change our situation. So I don't really understand why leaving a job for another thinking life is short could possibly be viewed as failure, or that it could be worse, All right. Okay, Iman has some questions. Number one, how can we best ensure that we practice death meditation effectively? Number two, what if some people had accepted that their death is imminent, which leads them to taking things in life lightly, living each day moderately and not to the fullest potential, knowing that everything is impermanent? Is such thought or action incorrect? First part of the question. First question, how can we best ensure that we practice death meditation effectively? How we can ensure that we practice death meditation effectively? Sorry, getting distracted by questions coming in. How we can best ensure that we practice death meditation effectively? There are guides for it online. I've read guides for it online, which guide us, direct us in the most effective way to engage in the meditation practice. And as I mentioned, there are teachings that Rinpoche has given us before on death meditation or on the dying process. So I would say how we can best ensure that we practice death meditation effectively is seeking our guru's advice or referring to our guru's teachings. Because for sure, any teacher will have some teachings which contribute to death meditation practice. So for us as Sam Rinpoche students, I would say refer to Rinpoche's blog. Refer to the blog post, which I will find for you guys. It's called, give me 1 second. I would say to refer to this blog post. All right, so I would say refer to the blog post, The Dying Process, because when you receive teachings from your teacher on the dying process or on what happens to us before, during, and after we die, by contemplating the teachings, by trying to understand the teachings, our teacher has already indirectly set out a guide for us to engage in death meditation effectively. We need to read the teachings, understand it, not just understand it, but also then practice it. All right. Number two, I know what you're talking about with regards to this. So people thinking, well, since I'm going to die anyway, why not just completely dedicate my life to hedonism, completely dedicate my life to enjoying myself, and dedicate my life to not caring and taking things lightly? When someone has accepted that their death is imminent and that leads them to taking things in life lightly, that is the result that arises from ignorance. That arises from people not understanding what happens to them after they die. They've gotten to the point where they understand that they are going to die, but they haven't gotten to the point where they've realized what happens after they die. So remember I spoke about in my video 2 weeks ago about capital leverage. And the question that somebody had asked, what is the baseline and what is it that we're optimizing for? So the baseline and what it is that we're optimizing for is what we believe happens to us after we die. So a person who has realized that death is imminent or that death is inevitable, but still chooses to take things lightly, is because their lightheartedness, arises from ignorance, arises from lack of study, and arises from lack of understanding about what happens to us after we die, where we might end up taking rebirth, and so on. All right, so it doesn't mean that a person who lives a hedonistic or nihilistic lifestyle is enlightened because they've realized that everything is impermanent. All right, someone who does not take things seriously after having realized that death is inevitable is someone who has not studied enough and someone whose actions remain guided by ignorance. So I would say that such thought or action, I wouldn't say it's incorrect, but I would say it's completely inadvisable, because it's inadvisable, not suggested, because in that instance, we are using death or using that realization to reinforce selfishness, to reinforce ego, to reinforce self-gratification. That's the word I was looking for, self-gratification. All right, so I wouldn't say it's incorrect. I would say that it's inadvisable. And I would say that when we observe someone who's behaving in that manner, and we know that they're behaving in that manner, and we know that that behavior is not helpful to them because they're just wasting time, basically, we should do our best to gently advise them, gently educate them, and gently give them knowledge so that they can readjust or they can adjust their action. All right. Okay, wait. So, Iman, I hope that answered your question. If it wasn't clear, please let me know and I will write something more eloquent after this live stream, okay? Hold on. Okay, Jenhao says, because if we're dedicated to our job and we keep chasing money or worldly materialism, it really depends, Jenhao. And that is one of the questions that I'm going to answer, not in April, in May, about the difference between taking ownership and the difference between attached. Some people are attached to their job. Some people take ownership of their job. And those two things are very, very different. And it also depends on what your job is. All right. I like that. Spend our time being a full-time volunteer at KFR. That's true. All right. Sharon said, Jenhao, a lot of us have our worldly commitments, etc. Instead of going full-time as a volunteer, you can consider being a Dharma staff. You can. And the other thing I would also talk about, the other thing I also suggest is that we view KFR, or we view a Dharma center, or we view Bentong as not a pilgrimage destination, but as our spiritual home. When you go to work and you're at work all day and night, what is it that you're longing for? What is it that you're thinking about? You are thinking that you can't wait to get home, that you want to finish your work very, very quickly so that you can get home and rest. So I would encourage people to think of KFR as their spiritual home, that the rat race, that samsara, that our daily worldly lives are so tiring, so much work, and we can't wait to get home, get back to our spiritual home, and to spend as much time there as possible. When we think of KFR as our spiritual home, naturally you'll find yourself gravitating more towards it. Naturally, you'll also find yourself wanting to do more for it, because we all take care of our physical homes, right? What Ramshi explained was, we all sweep our homes, we all vacuum our homes, we all paint the walls, we all repair the roof when it's leaking. We make sure that the electricity bill is paid. We make sure that the internet works. We make sure that our mortgage is paid. We make sure that the fridge is full. So we do all of those things for our own physical homes. Why? Because it's my home. It's mine. So I would think that for people, as Sharon explained, that people who have many commitments, that try to think of KFR as your spiritual home, that you want to spend as much time there as possible because it's your respite, it's your refuge from all the tiring difficulties, all the obstacles, all the worldly stuff that we're constantly surrounded with outside of KFR. And when you think of KFR as a spiritual home, you can't wait to get back to it. And you can't wait to spend as much time as possible in it. Then that naturally leads you to volunteering as much of your time as possible. So you don't need to think of yourself as a full-time volunteer or full-time staff, but whatever time you have, you automatically want to be there. You automatically want to go there. Just as if we automatically want to go and spend as much time in our own homes as possible. All right. So yeah, that's my little comment to what Sharon rightfully, helpfully suggested, which is consider being a Dharma staff. Yiling said, I remember Rinpoche's letter to Pastor Henry in the where, Yiling? Yes, Jenhao. DS will help us to clear obstacles for smooth Dharma class. I will pick somewhere with a more stable Wi-Fi connection next month. Oh yeah. Rinpoche's letter to Pastor Henry in the blog. Yeah. The blog is, I feel like a broken record saying this, but the blog is a huge resource of information and of knowledge. Why? Because Rinpoche recognized that when we post things on social media, in the future, if we want to revisit it, it may be difficult to find it because things get lost, they get pushed down. So Rinpoche wanted to set up the blog so that there is a permanent place where all of this can be stored and can be recorded for people to access and for people to benefit from in the future, that it will last long after we're gone. So I would highly recommend going to the blog because Rinpoche recorded a lot of advice for people in different situations there. There's advice for people who want to become Sangha. There's advice for people who want to be vegetarian or why they should be vegetarian. There's advice for people on how to get over failure, how to overcome failure. There is advice for people on how to meditate on death. There is advice for people on how on the ingredients for a successful relationship. So Rinpoche even gave advice and shared vows that we can take when we get married to create conditions for a successful relationship. All right, so I would highly recommend people going through the blog and taking their time to read, because a lot of the questions that are posed on Facebook, a lot of the comments that are made actually already have been answered in the blog. That's why oftentimes you'll see people saying, like, refer to this blog post. All the information is already there. All right. Sharon says, Dharma staff is the best word I could think of just now. Ha 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 ha. It doesn't feel like work when you work in our spiritual home. I cannot agree with that more, Sharon. When I first moved to Bentong, I was like, oh my God, this town only has 3 roads. What am I going to do? Now, I love Bentong. And I love KFR. I love the environment in KFR. And when I go down to KL, I cannot wait to get back to KFR. And everyone will hear me say this consistently. I cannot wait to leave KL. And I think moving to Bentong, is is not as difficult as we think or we make it out to be. Just as how going vegetarian is not as difficult as we think or make it out to be, moving to KFR, moving to Bentong is not as difficult as we think or make it out to be. It's the thought that's more difficult, the thought that's harder, the thought that we need to overcome. So yeah, I completely agree with you that it doesn't feel like work when you work in a spiritual home. Allow me to add to that, when you are at the privilege to live in a spiritual home, it doesn't feel like work either, because I wake up and then I go straight to, my daily activities, but it's not work. It's what I'm doing. All right. All right. I think that's it from me for today, because I did say that I was going to end at 11. I just want to remind you guys that, April, I will be answering questions about stray dogs, about whether it's compulsory for Buddhists to be vegetarian, because that is a question that was asked on YouTube, and also about donating to a temple versus donating to a charity. First, apologies for technical difficulties today. As I said, if you guys know anyone who can improve the Wi-Fi situation in KFR, or who can bring us phone signal, 4G phone signal, please let me know. So many people will be grateful. All right. Couple of reminders that we have a Qingming Puja coming up on April the 4th. And if you guys haven't made offerings already, you can do that on Budget Secrets. So before I go, very quickly actually, with relations to making offerings, a question that I've been asked quite frequently recently is people asking when they should make their dedications. Because, for example, they sponsored like a Genze for the Genze Chapel and so on. And, I encourage them, like, when you can, don't forget to recite your dedication prayers. Don't forget to do your dedications to seal the merit. And many times people come back and say, I don't know when the candle is going to be lit, or I don't know when the puja is going to be done, or I don't know when the Genze is going to be installed on the wall, or so on. So I don't know when to do my dedication. So, when should I do it? And what I want to remind or bring up is that it's okay if you don't know when, and you don't need to know when. Once you have made your offering, as soon as you hit the submit button, or as soon as you transfer whatever into, as soon as you hit submit, it's considered that your offering is done. So you can already do your dedication at that moment, and you can already seal the merits at that moment. You don't actually have to wait until the actual sata is like placed on the wall, or until the statue is actually put invited to its position. You don't actually have to wait until that specific moment. You can do it immediately as soon as you have hit submit. All right. And do it so that you seal the merits, because from your side, whatever it is that you can do, or that's within your power to do, whatever that it is that you can directly, physically get involved with, you've already done. So you can dedicate at that moment, and you can really seal the merits at that moment. So that's what I wanted to bring up. All right. You guys are very welcome. Again, I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties. At least you get to see my room, part of my room. That is something, this green bottle here. Surprise. I will be showing you in one of the videos coming up. All right. So yeah, that's it from me for this month live streaming. If you guys have any questions that you want to ask me in next month's live streaming, or if there's a specific topic that you want me to cover, please let me know, and I will look into doing that. All right. Thank you guys very much for joining me on this Sunday. Again, for like the 1000th time. So sorry for this. All right. I'll see you guys next Sunday with a new video, and have a great weekend, and take care. Bye guys.